Today I'm going to be showing you my runner's mobility warm-up routine. You can follow along or learn these exercises and take them with you. They're going to ensure that you are fully warmed up before running so that you don't get that rusty first mile feeling where your legs and your brain aren't on the same page, and it's also going to reduce your risk of injury by connecting those neural pathways before setting off to run, and so that you're actually limbered up, activated and ready to run. I also do these exercises before my running specific gym workout, and sometimes I do them in the evening after a long run to encourage recovery with a little bit of mobility activations. So let's get started. First up, we have downward dog to pigeon stretch. So feet shoulder width apart, hands slightly wider, and pushing the heels of your feet in that downward dog pose, then swinging one leg up to the ceiling before bringing it underneath you in that bent pigeon position. I tend to sit here for 5 or so seconds, sometimes longer if I feel I need to, and then repeating on the other side. This one is great for shoulder and hip mobility and getting a nice gentle glute stretch, and all of these dynamic drills that I'm showing you today I do for roughly 30 to 45 seconds before moving on to the next one. So with this movement I might get 3 or 4 in on each side before moving on. Next up is Spider-Man's with elbow to floor. Start in the press up position, then bring one leg forwards and place your foot down on the outside of your arm like a hyperextended lunge. As you can see, mine is not so hyperextended because I'm not very flexible, but that's okay. Then we're going to bend the elbow of the arm next to your foot and try to reach it down as close to the floor as you can, then almost twist outwards and reach up to the ceiling, opening up your midline, and then come back down to starting and then move on to the other side. I love this exercise. It's so good for the hips and hamstrings, and it really helps loosen off your back as well. And what you can do with this one is either stay in the Spider-Man position on one side and do that arm movement for 15 to 20 seconds and then switch like I did, or walk back up with your hands after each arm twist and switch sides, doing that for 30 to 45 seconds. It's totally up to you. Next up we have 90-90 hip switches, and for this one you're in a seated 90-90 position, funnily enough, which is much easier to demonstrate than describe. So like I have here, your legs are out in front of you and you're laid with your lower legs at a 90-degree angle to your upper legs or your thighs, and then keeping your feet and your butt firmly on the ground, you're just going to switch the direction that your legs are laying in, so it's the knees that are making this movement. This is another fantastic hip mobility exercise that really opens those tight, stiff hips. You want to sit as upright as possible for this one, and if you're really good, you can have your hands right out in front of you rather than on the ground like I have here, and then it'll work your core too. And if you want a deeper stretch and to hit the hamstrings and your back too, you can lean forwards over your front knee and then come back up and twist back, looking behind you of your back leg. But just be prepared to be tighter on one side than the other. Most of us are. Moving on to glute bridge hamstring walkouts. To start with, you're in a glute bridge position with your torso up at just under a 45-degree angle, and then you're going to take small, short steps with your feet or your heels to walk out into almost a reverse plank, but your shoulders remain grounded. Then simply take those small steps back into the glute bridge and continue for 30 seconds. Glute bridges are great for working the hips, core and glutes, and it's quite a relaxing static movement. So by adding in the walkout, it emphasizes the load on the hamstrings and really helps engage these muscles and activating the hips, core and glutes. This next one is one of my favourites, and it's called side lying windmills. Start by laying on your side with both arms out in front of you and your top leg is bent with that knee resting in front of you. Then rotate your top arm up and round, following the floor in a rainbow shape above you all the way over to the other side like a windmill. Following your hand with your eyes to engage your neck too, and then bring your arm back up and over to start again. This one works the mobility in your thoracic spine, so your upper back. And you can also put a foam roller under your top leg where that knee is to keep your hips square if this is too much of a stretch for you. And I spend 15 to 20 seconds on the one side before turning over and switching to the other side. Next up we have clamshells. So start by laying on one side again, hips stacked and your knees at a 90-degree bend, resting your head on that bottom arm. And you want your feet to be roughly in line with your body here, so mine are actually a little bit too far back. And then you've got your top hand on your hip to check that it isn't tilting forward. You really need your hips to stay square for this one. Then engaging your abs and keeping the feet together, you raise your top knee up in an opening motion as far as you can before your hips start to rotate. Then slowly lower your knee back down. Squeeze your heels together in this one and squeeze those glutes. You're activating all of those wonderful glute muscles that we use to run. You can also do this one with a light to medium resistance loop band just above your knees, and again I spend 15 to 20 seconds on one side before switching to the other. Now we're moving on to some lower leg and foot and ankle warm-up walks. This first one is straight leg heel marches. So taking short, sharp steps and only having a slight bend in the knee, you're contacting the ground only with your heel, so you're pulling your toes up to the ceiling. And this is not only going to engage your feet and the plantar and your toes, but you're also activating your calves too. So for this one, I do 15 seconds walking forwards and then switch to doing the same exercise in a backwards walk for 15 seconds as well. Next up is tiptoe walks, and again, straight legged here, and it is what it says on the tin. You're coming up onto your tippy toes and walking with tiny steps as if you've got very high heels on and trying to keep that bend in the leg ever so minimal. And we're engaging the calves again here, and you can even see them working in this shot as my feet contact the ground. And again, I walk backwards after 15 seconds of the forwards version of this drill to round off the 30 seconds. Another great one for your feet is heel-toe walks, and I do these with a slight bend in my knees, aiming to keep my head perfectly level. So rather than coming up onto my tiptoes, it's almost like you're trying to glide over the room without any upper body movement. So strike the ground with your heel and then use that bend in the knee to soften the movement as you come through the midfoot and onto your toes. And this one's great for engaging the feet and letting your feet completely spread out on the inside of your shoes, loosening them up and making sure that your feet aren't super rigid before you start running. And again, I do this one backwards for the second half, which is actually a lot harder than it looks. Next up we have toe taps, and yes, you're literally tapping your toes as if your Auntie Sue is waiting for you to get the gravy ready for Sunday lunch. So you're tapping the toes of one foot in front of the other standing leg, and this actually burns after a while. Keep up a good tempo of 1 tap per second or faster and you will soon feel it in your calves, and this one is also great for warming up the ankles too. Again, 15 to 20 seconds on one foot before switching onto the other side. Now, the next 3 exercises I only do before a gym session, not before my runs, but stick around until after those because I'm also going to be giving you my 4 favourite pre-run banded activation exercises as well. Breaking news. You're probably not sleeping enough. These days, I feel like naps and sleeping in is discouraged because we have ourselves a hustle culture where getting enough sleep actually isn't cool, but staying up late and working too much is. What's up with that? And the guys over at Manta Sleep couldn't agree more. They're part of the pro nap movement, which wants to see you getting enough good quality sleep, and if that means naps and it means sleeping in, so be it, because sleep is so important. It leaks into every area of our lives. Our mood, our well-being, our health, our sports performance, our relationships, it's the lot. And if you're trying to take a nap in the daytime and the sun is creeping through those curtains, or you've got street lights outside your house so it's not going to be completely dark inside, the Manta Sleep Mask is the perfect solution. And this Manta Sleep Mask Pro is my absolute favourite because as a side sleeper, most masks aren't comfortable to have on whilst you're sleeping on your side. The Manta mask has C-shaped removable cups so you can put them exactly where your eye sockets are, so it's going to be comfortable for you. Your eyelashes aren't going to be touching the mask so it feels like you don't have one on, and the tapered edges means that the mask is not digging into your face, and this one keeps you nice and cool so you're not overheating either. Join the pro nap movement with Manta and grab yourself 10% off using my code Phily, which is on screen now, or you can follow the link in the description, because I want you to be getting sleep that's as good as mine. Back to the video. So, continuing the runner's gym mobility warm-up first, next up is the arabesque or single leg Russian deadlift. Standing on one leg with a slightly soft knee and with your other leg in a runner's A position or high knee, slowly lower your chest towards the floor, extending that knee from the A position back behind you in a straight line, and you want to keep your back neutral and your hips square, and then slowly return to an upright position. These can be quite difficult at first, and I've always found these quite tough as I have a slight curvature of the spine, which means I'm not quite symmetrical, and to make these easier, you can do them beside a wall for a little bit of support. So don't go too low down when you lean your chest forward, keep your hand on that wall if you need to, and if you can't quite get horizontal without tilting your hips or losing balance, just go part way there. And again, I split this 20 seconds on one side, 20 on the other, or you can do 5 to 8 repetitions if you want to take it slower and not necessarily time yourself, and then switch to the other side. This next one is if you want to make these arabesques even harder or just to add an extra element. So you can try these arabesques with rotations, and essentially it's the same movement but with aeroplane arms spread wide, which can actually help you balance, and then when you reach the upright position, you're just going to twist twist your upper body 90 degrees to one side, come back to center, repeat the arabesque, and then come up and twist to the other side. And don't forget to repeat this on the opposite leg as well. And then last up in my runner's gym warm-up routine is the floor to shelf. And in this one, I want you to imagine that you've got a crate of your favorite stuff. For me, I've got my invisible chocolate milks down here, and essentially you're retiring one of your legs for this exercise. So you stay standing on one leg the whole time, bending when you reach the floor to pick up your invisible crates, whilst keeping your back straight and then coming up into a tiptoe high knee to put that chalky milk on the top shelf where no one can get it. And this is a really nice one that incorporates lots of muscle groups to work in tandem, which is why I do it right at the end when I'm mostly warmed up. And that's my full warm-up before the gym. A lot of those exercises, as I said, I will do pre-run too, and on some evenings for mobility and active recovery. And lastly, these are my 4 favourite pre-run resistance band activation exercises. And for these, you want a loop resistance band or a mini loop band. So get your hands on some resistance bands. They're super cheap. They're really easy to just take with you, chuck in the car. If you're meeting a friend in a car park, he's sneezing. They're super easy to just chuck in the car, and you can do your final few activations in the car park if you're meeting some friends or just before you set off for your run. The first one, putting the band just above your ankles and having one foot firmly on the ground. I actually don't know what this one's called, but I'm going to call it pointing to the corner of the room with your heel. It's a backwards diagonal motion. You're keeping a soft bend in the knee of your standing leg, and then in the leg that you're extending backwards, you're just extending at a diagonal 45-degree angle to an imaginary corner of an imaginary room if you're outside. And I do 12 to 15 of these on each leg before swapping sides. And it's not about building strength before you go for your run, it's just about activating those muscles. And whilst you're doing this one, if you need to, you can hold on to a wall, the side of your car, wherever you are, and make sure you keep the toes of the foot that you're moving backwards dorsiflexed. You don't want them dragging down and pointing to the floor. The next one, you're going to move that band from just above your ankles to just above your knees for standing clamshells. So you're going to be standing on one leg with your other leg bent and your foot behind you so that your leg is at a 90-degree angle, and then you're just going to open outwards. It's going to be that opening the gate motion, so you're tilting that knee of the leg that's off the ground out to the side, and again keep your hips super square on this one, so you want to keep them facing forwards. And if you get to the point where you're extending so much that your hips start to twist, you want to stop and come back to center. Do these really slowly. It's not about rushing the movement, it's about engaging those muscles, so make sure you can feel your glutes working and you're doing it right. And again, I'll do 12 to 15 of these on each side. The next one is crab walks or banded ankle walks. So the band is back around your ankles and you're going to get into a squat position. Making sure you stay nice and deep in that squat position, but not so much that your knees are rolling over your toes and your heels are coming off the ground. We're going to take side steps like a crab does. Start off with your feet just a little bit wider than shoulder distance apart, and you're going to take small steps that are about the same length as the size of your feet. First up, we take 10 to 12 steps in one direction, and then we come back the other way, and I tend to do these twice. If you clasp your hands and hold them out in front of you, this can help to balance you because you really want to stay upright whilst you're doing this, and make sure that you're not bending your back or holding any extra tension in your neck. And the last one is a really fun one. It's called monster walks or Frankenstein walks. And for this one, you can have the band just below your knees at the tops of your shins or around your ankles again, you can choose. It's another one that's working those glute muscles just like the one that I showed you, but we're walking a little bit differently. So again, you want to get down into that squat position, but instead of moving laterally side to side, we're going to be moving forwards, but bringing your knees to meet each other before you take each step. It's a lot easier to demonstrate than to describe this one, but essentially you're walking like Frankenstein did. And this one I tend to take 10 to 12 steps forwards and then do the same motion but walking backwards. Hope you enjoyed following along with my mobility routine and my runner's warm-up. If you found it useful, hit that like button. And if I've missed any of your favourite warm-up exercises, please leave them in the comment section below. I'm sure they'll be helpful to someone. And as always, love the grind.